The Chargers have introduced two new up-and-coming stars in their offensive coordinator search, and both have a legitimate case for the job.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer. And we've been covering the Chargers now for 7 seasons, but this is our 5th season as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen today. And to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. And today we're talking about another couple of exciting offensive coordinator candidates the Chargers have reached out to try and interview. Bills quarterback coach Joe Brady, and also Thomas Brown from the Rams, another Rams assistant, getting an interview. So we're going to talk about Joe Brady working with some great quarterbacks like Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, Drew Brees as well, but also talk about why his stint as an offensive coordinator is probably a little bit different than Joe Lombardi, because both of them got fired in basically a season and a half, and things were definitely a dumpster fire in Carolina. So we'll talk about that, and also some red flags that maybe came from his offensive coordinatorship with that team. And then talk about Thomas Brown, who relationship-wise wanted to run the football with everything Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley have said. It seems like their visions match up there, but there's also, I think, some things that would hold you back from necessarily just going with him right after the interview as well. But today's episode of Locked On Chargers is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 6 players. If they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win now up to 25 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match with the promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com. Promo code Locked On. David, we have now heard reports that the Chargers are trying to, or at least have requested permission to interview Bills quarterbacks coach Joe Brady, a really up-and-coming name, especially a couple of years ago, a bunch of head coaching interviews and things like that. According to Mike Garofalo, the Chargers have requested him, but so have some other teams as well, and it's unclear whether he's going to accept it. But this is a very interesting name for sure in the cycle.
Yeah, this is a name I think that a lot of people are very curious about, just because of all of the things surrounding Joe Brady, this hot, young offensive mind coming from college, winning a national championship, and working with some really good players so far with his tenure being a coach.
A lot of really interesting players. And I think the first thing you have to do is go back and look at what did he do last year. So you went to the Bills last year as their quarterback coach because Brian Daboll got a job with the Giants. Ken Dorsey, their quarterback's coach from before, moved up to be offensive coordinator. And then Joe Brady slided into his slot. And I mean, if you're just looking at taking someone from an offense, even though it was only 1 year in that offense, the Bills are not a bad place to start, right? A very, very exciting offense, a very explosive offense. The Bills 7th in explosive plays in 2022. 51 passing plays of 20 plus yards, but 62 rushing plays of 20 or 10 plus yards. And I thought that was interesting. More explosive plays in the running game, which is a big focus for the Chargers, obviously. But turnovers, and specifically red zone turnovers, killed them. But there was a lot of places where they were really good. I mean, they were 9th in red zone touchdown percentage, 1st and 3rd down percentage, and 4th in points per play. That is the type of offense that you're looking for. You want a more explosive offense from Justin Herbert, and he's coming from that at the very least.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, hey, Josh Allen's average depth of target was 10.2. That is unreal, especially when you consider Justin Herbert's, which was sitting around 6.7 to 7, in the first couple of years he's been in the league. That's what you envision for Justin Herbert. That's the type of arm that he has. You expect that. You expect him to be really dissecting and attacking the intermediate and deep parts of the field. That's exactly what Josh Allen has done under the tutelage of Joe Brady and Ken Dorsey.
If you look at that wild card weekend and you look at just, where it's showing where these quarterbacks are throwing to on a kind of virtual field to see the depth of it, I mean, it's pretty wild to look at where Justin Herbert's was in that disappointing loss to where Josh Allen's was when they won in the first weekend. I mean, they even maybe too often are throwing it deep down the field and not taking enough of the short stuff. But like, even if you could meet somewhere in between what Joe Lombardi's offense was and what they were running in Buffalo this year, I think you'd happily take that, especially because they were a pretty balanced team. I mean, they were 16th in the NFL in rushing attempts, and when they did run the ball, they did it effectively. 3rd in average yards per carry, 8th in yards per game coming from the Chargers. who were, 28th or worse in all of those
Just bad.
categories.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was just really, really bad. And I think a lot of people have been like, well, Josh Allen was worse in 2022 when this guy took over. And I think that's, legitimate if there had been some regression there. I mean, turnovers are always going to be something with Josh Allen. It's amazing that they've gotten him to limit it, in some of his better seasons, but that has always been one of the bigger concerns about him. I'm not as concerned about that with Justin Herbert, who's extremely careful with the football, even if the interception numbers might tell you differently, ton of tip passes and things like that. But when I look at the stats, David, I mean, he wasn't much different at all between 2021 and 2022.
I'm about to say, where's the regression at? I mean, the numbers are almost like eerily identical.
Yeah.
63.3 completion percentage both seasons, over 44,000 passing yards, over 35 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and 15 interceptions. And then the rushing numbers, even scarier. 763 rushing yards in 2021, 762 rushing yards in 2022.
Well, and
So,
that's great too, because that's a big part of it, right? Getting Justin
yeah,
Herbert to run the football is important. I mean, 7.8 attempts by Josh Allen in
yeah.
2022, 7.2 last year. So they ran it with him more this year than they did last year, and a little less efficiently. But that has to be an attractive thing for, wanting Justin Herbert to use his athleticism more.
And he has that skill set. He has that ability to run the football. And I feel like that's something that should be incorporated a little bit more. And again, I understand why it wasn't really utilized a lot last year.
Yeah.
Obviously, anybody who has injured ribs, you're not going to want to throw him out there to get him battered like a pinball. That's not the ideal
It wasn't
situation.
much better either, though, in
No,
2021, right? So that's the other
no,
thing.
but he can do it. And
Yeah.
he did it a lot in college. So why aren't we incorporating a little bit more of that? Maybe Joe Brady is somebody who can come in and unlock a little bit more of Justin Herbert as the rusher, because I think we all know that he has that element to his game that really hasn't been utilized very much in his pro career.
And in his college career, the biggest game he probably played was the Rose Bowl
Yeah.
against Wisconsin, where he, wasn't throwing the ball as well as he had seen him throw the ball.
Right.
And instead, he started using his legs and did it in a different way and scored 3 rushing touchdowns. I'm
Carved
not
him up.
calling for
Yeah.
4, quarterback draws a game. He's not going to be Josh Allen. You
No.
don't want him taking the beating that Josh Allen takes. And Josh Allen also played this season with a hurt elbow, right? And still put up
Sure.
those crazy numbers, and also played one less game and almost
Yeah.
had as many touchdowns, right?
Yeah.
I think that this is a very appealing thing from the aspect of, Josh Allen didn't take a step back at all, really, when you look at it this
No.
year with Joe Brady taking over, and Ken Dorsey gets the most of the credit. And yeah, it's hard to kind of differentiate what each of those guys are doing. But I think the big thing here is this guy has worked with a lot of great quarterbacks, or a few of them at the very least. And I think that
Sure.
has to be super attractive, right? He was the Saints offensive assistant in 2017, 2018. I know Joe Lombardi, that might scare some people because he did, similar things, was with the Saints a long time. But those were really the last best years of Breeze, where he could still push it a little bit down the
But I
field.
think that's important though to have that connection, because obviously the offense that Justin Herbert has been running has a lot of that Saints connection. So you
Maybe
want
it
to have
makes it a little
somebody who
easier,
can
sure.
translate that language a little bit easier, and Joe Brady has some of that, that knowledge. So I think that's important.
I think it could help the transition for
Yeah.
sure. LSU passing game coordinator and wide receivers coach for Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
Panthers offensive coordinator, that wasn't good in 2021. Buffalo Bills quarterback coach last year, working with Josh Allen, working with Stephon Diggs and those guys. But being able to say you've worked with Drew Brees and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, like, those are very different guys. You've seen it happen a lot of different ways, and you have to hope maybe he's taking a little bit from each.
Well, he's trying to, get the Infinity Stones, right? He's trying to be Thanos. He's trying to collect all the good quarterbacks to
Yeah,
to
Justin Herbert
coach
that
with,
list.
right? He's trying to add Justin Herbert to the list of Infinity Stone quarterbacks that he gets to coach up. So yeah, I mean, hey, that is a lot of really high quality experience. Not a lot of experience, but I think it's good quality experience dealing with guys that have a track record of immense success, not only at the collegiate level but at the pro level as well.
And the Joe Burrow in that LSU offense, probably the best college offense I've ever
Ever.
seen.
Yeah.
But Josh Allen's good and was good already. Joe Burrow
Sure.
is very good. Made a big, big jump with Joe Brady as
Oh, yeah.
opposed to what he had done the season before. It's hard to know how much he helped, because those are really great quarterbacks, especially Drew Brees, who had already done it for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And there are some red flags as well that we're going to get into that, maybe make you take a second thought about it. It's hard to totally blame the Panther situation, though, because that was a real storm of bad things. It went really bad, and Matt Rule has a lot of the blame for that as well. And we're going to get into that. But first, I need to tell you guys that today's episode is brought to you by our new favorite sponsor, FanDuel. I'm very, very excited about FanDuel because, I mean, hey, who doesn't love using FanDuel and being able to get more on the action of the games that you're watching? And the NFL playoffs are here now, and we're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because the number one sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. If you're looking for games this week and it's interesting, the Chiefs are now only a 1-point underdog against the Bengals after starting the week off as 1.5-point underdogs. Probably Patrick Mahomes' ankle has a lot to do with that, but that one's going to be really, really interesting. But FanDuel also has all of your favorite bets from money line to point spreads to play your props, which I love. And the game changer is the same game parlay, where you can go with different props from the same game and, double, triple, quadruple your money in one game instead of having to do it all on separate games, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get a $150 in free bet credit with FanDuel. Win or lose at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment matter with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. David, there's a lot to like, I think, with Joe Brady. I mean, he would definitely be someone I would consider at least be putting my due diligence in if I'm the Chargers with Justin Herbert and finding who's going to take over this offense for a lot of reasons. But I think the biggest hang up is people think like this. Joe Lombardi and him were almost in identical situations as far as they had a shot at as an offensive coordinator. It went terribly, and they both got fired in under 2 seasons. I mean, I think Joe Lombardi's is worse for a few different reasons, and it's different for a few different reasons. And I think they came into very different situations. Joe Lombardi comes in with Matthew Stafford, Calvin Johnson, Golden Tate, Eric Ebron, some legitimate weapons, and a really solid head coach in Jim Caldwell, very respected, very respected, and he underperformed with those guys, right? When you look at the Panthers, these are the things that Joe Brady had working against him. At least, and we'll talk about some of the things that were definitely, at least partially his fault as well. But
sure,
he only got Christian McCaffrey for 10 games over his 2 years as
158 carries between the 2 seasons. That's it.
I mean, never really had a guy that would be, one of your best weapons, or definitely their best weapon for sure.
Huge difference maker.
And then there's the quarterbacks, right? And that's the thing where it's like, when Joe Brady has been around good quarterbacks, those good quarterbacks have been great. Drew Brees was great when he was there, and he was just an offensive assistant.
Sure.
But passing game specialist for LSU, Joe Burrow is great. He's with Josh Allen. Josh Allen continues to be great.
Yep.
In Carolina, he had Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Darnold, and Cam Newton. And I think that's one of those things where it's like, that makes it very hard to kind of
not good Cam Newton. Let's be real here. Not good Cam Newton. Yeah, the quarterbacks that he got to play with.
Carolina stint for Cam Newton. Yeah,
not good. And I think they were and I think this is being very, very generous. They were very mid. Okay, both of those quarterbacks, where they're at, they never really had any kind of consistent success in the NFL. And it's hard to play quarterback in that system, especially also, Daniel, when you have a really, really bad offensive line that was in front of you. So a lot of detractors, a lot of things that was really working against Joe Brady there.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is, and we read a lot just about how everything happened there, and he kind of tried to get the background of why he was fired and things like that. And it wasn't something reportedly that sat well with the Panthers players. That is something that came out afterwards. Just, they weren't happy about it. And the way it happened, David, an article from The Athletic from Joe Person, basically Matt Rule took the week off during the bye week and let Joe Brady go in and give Cam Newton extra coaching and stay there at the facilities during the bye week instead of going home, and being with his family and things like that. And then fired Joe Brady the next week as they're getting ready to play their next team while he was, doing whatever he was doing during that time instead of, doing it right as the bye week hit so he knows instead of kind of stringing him along. Either way, I mean, it was a bad situation there all around, and Matt Rule wasn't long behind him. I'm surprised he didn't get fired immediately after that season. An upset. What I was impressed by, though, is at least the wide receivers, even with subpar quarterback play in 2020 when Joe Brady was there, still found a way to be successful. And he is a wide receivers coach as well and a former wide receiver in college. And those guys, even with Teddy Bridgewater, DJ Moore put up 1,193 yards, Robbie Anderson, 1,096 yards, Curtis Samuel, 851 yards, and another 200 rushing yards. That's 3,
really good season.
1,000-yard receivers, or total yards between those 3 guys, and doing it, with no Christian McCaffrey really at all that season. That's pretty impressive. I think there are still some good things you can take away, but there's still going to be some bad things as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that Matt Rule regime was horrible. That entire situation was really really bad, and for him to kind of use Joe Brady and then fire him after he was going to come back, I think that's a really shady move. I don't think anybody should be doing business that way, and I think that's just one of the many examples of why that entire administration did not work, and it was definitely one that had to go. But I think one of the underlying issues of why they said that they fired Joe Brady was that Matt Rule wanted to be a little more committed to the running game, Daniel, and he wanted to run more 30 to 35 times per game, and that did not happen. I mean, when they were firing Joe Brady, they had only 16 carries in that last game before they parted ways with him, and so that commitment never really translated.
Yeah, and I mean it's tough when you don't have your best running back, obviously, but that wasn't their specialty at all, and
No.
neither unit was really good. And game flow has a lot to do with it, and game script has a lot to do with it too. If you get down 14-0 early because your quarterback throws two
Yeah,
interceptions,
hard to
it's
run.
going to be a lot harder to just run the ball and lean on people and wear people out like Matt Rule wanted to do. And that just was something that, definitely worked against him. And, this is where they were bad. These were the concerns. This is why he ended up getting fired. 24th and third down conversion percentage in 2020, 29th in 2021. And that's obviously not all him because after they fired him that season, they went 0-5. So things
Yeah,
didn't get any better after they let him go. But they were
not
also
at all.
28th in red zone touchdown percentage in 2020, 25th in 2021. Those are all really bad. All of those things are really hard to do when you don't have your best running back and you don't have a quarterback, which he didn't
Yeah.
have in any of those seasons, right? But yeah, getting away from the running game, I think, is a concern because that is something the Chargers have been so gung ho about. But this is really, I think, one of the things that got taken out away from that was his former quarterback with the Saints, and then he brought him in with the Panthers, Teddy Bridgewater, on a podcast saying, hey, one of the things that really hurt us and one of the reasons we weren't very good is because Joe Brady wasn't having us do 2-minute drills in red zone drills at practice, and that he should be able to do that for their growth. That's obviously not something you want to hear. Hard to imagine that would happen, though, with the Chargers.
Yeah, that's not happening under Brandon Staley because we know him is he's a guy that's emphasized that a lot. He's a guy that said that that's very important. That is something they work on. Something we saw them work on a lot when we saw them at spring training or not spring training, but in
Training camp.
training camp. Yeah, they did that a lot. So I think that's that partially Joe Brady's fault, but I think that's more the head coach's responsibility. And I think that's something that Brandon Staley does very well is map out and is very, very
That's a
detail
big part of the
oriented.
Chargers.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a huge
practices.
part of their practice schedule. So I don't think that would be something that is much of a concern as some of the other things that we did hear that are detractors that are maybe a little more concerning.
This is the most damning thing from the Athletics, Joe Person, who covers them and has for a long time. By all accounts, Brady is a smart, hardworking coach. If we stop there, it'd be great. But he seemed overmatched on game days, from his inability to make effective halftime adjustments to poor game management. The Vikings example cited by Bridgewater was them, having poor management in a game where that's what Teddy Bridgewater was basically talking trash about, was far from the only time the Panthers seemed to be struggling to decide on a play, while Robbie Anderson was livid when Brady didn't start running double moves when the Eagles defensive backs were sitting on routes in a week 5 loss this season, and that season was 2021. That is more concerning. The other thing
Yes.
was they were a very bad third quarter offense as well. It, that's very, very concerning. You have to hope
Yeah.
he's grown. Is it going to look more like the Carolina offense? Is it going to look more like the Buffalo offense? You don't want to see more third quarter struggles. You don't want to hear that this guy is struggling to decide which plays to call. But a lot of those things, it's so hard to differentiate when Sam Darnold's your quarterback, right? And yeah, what is
Yeah.
the right play to run when you have Sam Darnold who could throw a pick six or could throw for a first down? You don't know. Either way, you can't totally put it all on Matt Rule. You can't totally take the blame away from Joe Brady. And those are the red flags. There's not going to be a perfect, example of a coordinator, that's going to come in or a candidate for that position that's going to come with no flaws. And he
No one's
definitely
perfect.
has his. But he does have experience as a play caller, so that's a check, right? Comes from an
Yeah.
explosive offense that gets chunk plays. That's a
Yep.
check. Has worked with really good quarterbacks and has never made those quarterbacks worse, seemingly, which I think is a huge check as well.
Yeah.
But there is some downside to it as well, and he has to prove that he's ready for this job. And the last time he got a job, he probably took a bad job, and he wasn't ready at that point.
But
So
that's a
has he
learning
been able?
experience. That's a learning
Totally.
experience for
In
him,
the
and
last year
hopefully
and a half, has he been able to, make that ground up, I guess.
that's exactly what I was going to
Yeah.
say is hopefully he can take the experiences from all the different places that he's been, all the stops, and learn from those mistakes and get better. That's what we do as humans.
Yeah.
Anytime that we're going to improve in our jobs, we learn from those mistakes and we get better and we become better at our jobs. So hopefully he did that as well.
And the Chargers have a cast of wide net. He's just one of a lot of guys. I mean, he
Yeah,
definitely is an interesting option for sure. So is Thomas Brown, who is another up and coming star who's coming through the Rams organization. And there's one thing for sure about him. He should be committed to the run if you're listening to kind of what he's been saying and what he's known for as a former NFL and college running back. We're going to get to that, but today's episode is also brought to you guys by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is my favorite daily fantasy app, and the best part about it is it's just you versus the PrizePicks projections. You go on there, you find the projections and the matchups that you like, and that's where you win, right? That's how you find the best things, the best matchups for yourself. And all you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can now win up to 25 times your money on any entry. Before, you can win up to 10 times 2 to 5 players. Now you can win up to 25 times your money on your entry. And they have really, really cool entries that you can make too. I mean, you can go on there and select and make entries for more or less than on the passing yards between Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. Can they go over 465 passing yards in this upcoming game? Or you could even do it with Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy. There's a lot of good ones, but if you don't want to make those selections on football right now, I understand it. And the great news is you can also go PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, whatever you're looking for, you can make your selections on PrizePicks, and entries can be made so easily in 60 seconds or less. I can't tell you how many entries I've made last second. It is very, very quick. And first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. All you have to do is go download the PrizePicks app and go to PrizePicks.com or go to PrizePicks.com and sign up and play daily fantasy sports. If you deposit $100, they'll give you $100. If you deposit $50, you will get $50. So don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Thomas Brown, who I called, I think, Thomas Jones yesterday, mixed up my former NFL running backs, is another man who is in the mix for the Chargers offensive coordinator job. And I think the biggest thing is you're getting a former running back, and that comes with some pros and cons because, yes, the
sure.
Chargers want to improve the running game, but they also want to make sure Justin Herbert is developing and going in the right direction as well. One thing that would help that, having a running game.
Yeah.
This guy is an interesting history, David. I mean, he's a guy who's been around for a little bit now at the collegiate and pro level and has had a lot of different positions in 3 seasons with the Rams. Sean McVay has very high things to say about him. He's definitely another interesting prospect if the Chargers want to go this way. And it seems like they're willing to take a Rams guy because this is the third Rams guy that they're going to interview.
Yeah, they're definitely fishing in that pond for sure. They're trying to see how many different offensive minds from under that McVay
When
tree
some
that they
people
can
are saying,
possibly
hey,
catch.
maybe some of these guys are coming in to potentially come with whoever of these 3 guys that we've seen so far get hired. Can these other guys follow them? It's that kind of a job interview in that sense as well. And that could
And
be part of it.
that's definitely possible because hey, offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach both got fired, so both those positions are vacant and whatever other arbitrary titles that they're going to make underneath them. But I think that just listening to Thomas Brown, reading about Thomas Brown here from the Athletic, it seems like him and Brandon Staley have very similar philosophies on building relationships.
Values, yeah.
One of the excerpts here is I learned how to, I would say, read people's spirits, how they move. I'm going to be able to engage with you in a productive manner. In a world I live in, from a football standpoint, it's supposed to be all about communication and connection. What does that sound like? That sounds like Brandon Staley talking right now. Those guys that have that same kind of mentality, that same type of approach, kind of have that same mindset on how they want to build a team.
And the disciples from Sean McVay have all been really successful. I mean,
Yeah.
4 Sean McVay disciples are head coaches now: Brandon Staley, Matt LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell, and Zach Taylor.
Yep.
3 of those coaches were in the playoffs, and the other one was Matt LaFleur, who's had a few 13-3 seasons, and NFC championship games that he's already gone to. So
Yep.
taking from this tree historically has been a good thing for at least head coaches. But if you're looking at just where he's coming from, he's definitely still green. It's nice that he has play calling experience. He was the University of Miami's offensive coordinator from 2016 to 2018 under Mark Richt. And called plays there, which is a big deal. He's owned an offense. He's run an offense, which is great. And then with the Rams in 2020, running backs coach. 2021, they gave him the assistant head coach role and running backs coach, which, I mean, obviously you're trying to keep this guy around. You're giving him new titles. You're making him more involved in the offense. And in 2022, He was made assistant head coach and tight ends coach, but they did pass on him as their offensive coordinator. They ended up bringing someone else in for that job instead of hiring or promoting him from within, which is hard to say how much of that. But Sean McVay did say specifically that one of the reasons they made him the tight ends coach was to get him more involved in the Rams passing game. And that's something, and that wasn't much to write home about in 2022 with the Rams. But this is a guy that is coming up under Sean McVay, who Brandon Staley obviously respects. And every season he's going up and moving into a different position. So he's definitely a rising star in a pool of guys and coaches that everyone around the league is really trying to get at.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, like I said, like you said, a lot of success there with with that tree, with getting guys from that tree, and it seems like he has a good head on his shoulders. One of the things that kind of gives me a little bit of pause about Thomas Brown is his offensive philosophy here. Something I'm a little bit kind of scared of when I read it, but this is kind of what his philosophy is. It requires egoless play calling. The coach or coordinator must be willing to pick away at the defense in little pieces with a ball control run game and select the most efficient moments to pass. That sounds exactly like a running back to me. And also, I don't know if that's the type of offense that I want Justin Herbert to be running, because it sounds pretty familiar from the offense that we just saw. And it was someone that was an offense that was really kind of putting shackles on Justin Herbert's ability and potential. And, I understand, the application for that to be successful in certain places, but I don't know if that's the offense I want to see the Chargers run with Justin Herbert.
And just because he's saying incremental gains doesn't mean it means in the passing game, right? I think it means also a lot more running the football to go up against these too high safety looks, which is what he was talking about, trying to
Yeah,
keep up with the modern defenses. How do you attack these too high safety looks when the explosive plays are much harder to come by, which is what teams do to Justin Herbert to try to limit the big plays. And that is something that's, a new evolution to it. But this is also the other thing. What Jordan Rodriguez said in her article for The Athletic, which was great. If you want to learn more about Thomas Brown, that's a great place to start before this season. She did a deep dive on him. The coordinator who wants to beat this defense must operate counter to the convention and comfort of the modern explosive passing game and commit to the incremental games without fear or hesitation. I don't know if I want to go away from the modern explosive passing game a lot, right? I
exactly.
mean, that's something, but this is also what she had to say. And this is why he's so respected and gets this. I mean, first of all, he's already had a head coaching interview. So that's pretty impressive, because
Yeah, it
when
is.
he got it, he was only a running backs coach. So that is pretty nuts, right? And had only been in the NFL for 2 seasons at that point. This is what she said. Everybody who meets Brown believes he'll be a head coach someday. Often and unprompted, they add that when he does get an opportunity, he'll be there for a decade or longer. And that is kind of what this is. The Chargers are trying to get on the ground floor of an up and coming coach who's really, really rising through the ranks fast. And Brandon Staley has talked about that for better or for worse, right? And maybe not everyone is Brandon Staley, and maybe Brandon Staley is a good thing. Maybe it's not. It's still kind of the jury is out on that at this
Definitely.
point. He's a
Yeah.
winning coach over the first 2 seasons, but there's obviously a lot of questions behind that.
Yep.
But this guy, this would be them kind of trying to beat the curve, trying to get
Yeah.
this guy before he, gets a better title and starts ending, getting more of these opportunities. At the same time, are you going to trust a former running back, a guy who's never coached higher than a tight ends coach, right? Never been a quarterbacks coach or an offensive coordinator, at least in the NFL level, with your star quarterback, Justin Herbert? And as much as you want to run the ball and be better at that, that is still a big task to task this guy with being able to shape the development of your up and coming superstar.
Yes, and that's why this is with this particular candidate here, it's hard to just envision him being the right candidate just without understanding what he's bringing to the table from a passing perspective. Because when you have Justin Herbert, that is going to be part of the equation, and I think Tom Telesco has already said that they want balance, but they're never going to be a truly balanced team. Whenever you have Justin Herbert and these wide receivers, it is going to be more of a 60-40 split pass to run. And that's kind of more of where they want to be at. And, when you have that type of offensive firepower, you want to try to expose that and utilize that and exploit that. But, we'll see what happens. A lot of candidates coming through. I'm excited that the fact that the Chargers are casting this wide net. They are talking to a lot of different candidates. They're taking their time, and we're trying to figure out the best person to lead this Chargers offense into the future.
And it's such a huge job, and it's such a coveted job, such a good opportunity for someone because it only takes one good season and then you are someone's head coach.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Just like Shane Steichen will probably end up being someone's head coach this year because of what they've done with Jalen Hurts and just being a part of that team. You stand next to Justin Herbert, your future is bright. On the flip side, Brandon Staley could be, only on the job for one more year. So how to do these candidates kind of weigh that when they're getting interviews from not just the Chargers, but some other teams as well. And you still have to mix in all of the other guys the Chargers could be trying to interview that are still in the playoffs. Obviously, they couldn't ask for Joe Brady until now. Now the Bills are out of the playoffs. Now they're asking for it. So if they're really casting a wide net, you'd have to think some more on the horizon. And we'll be with here to talk to you about all of them and get into them and kind of what their philosophies are. So today, one guy more of a running game philosophy, another guy more of an explosive pass heavy offense, which is, something that sounds really, really nice with Justin Herbert. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for the latest news that comes out and also more on the Chargers' biggest decisions. Keenan Allen salary cap, a lot of things going on right now to make sure you don't miss it. Go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. And you can also find the show every day on all of our social media. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer on Twitter at DroTalkSD. You can also find the show's page at Locked On LAC or our Facebook page, or Locked On Chargers Facebook page, or at Locked On Chargers on Instagram. Thank you guys again for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL podcast because they are bringing the local insights from all of the best teams from around the NFL or all the teams, and they can see the national spotlight and just keep up with everything. It's hard to get outside the Chargers bubble and keep up with everything going on around the league, but they have the best daily conversations and the best analysis that only the local experts can bring at Locked On NFL. But thank you guys for listening to today's show. Make sure you're back here tomorrow, as always, and for the rest of the offseason content coming up. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.